Hey there guys, Mr. Luna here, just stopping by to share another video lesson with you. So today we will be covering intelligence. I just simply want you to review this content with me. So follow along, go ahead and jot some notes down. It is a very important segment, so let's go ahead and take care of it. So when we talk about intelligence, we need to know that this is the ability to learn from experience, to solve problems, and use knowledge to adapt to new situations. Of all psychological topics, intelligence is the most thoroughly studied, which research in the field dating more than 120 years ago, believe it or not. So, private and federal funding have been dumped into intelligence research to not only determine what it is and how to identify it, but also how to potentially increase it individually. As such, a fair amount of research has focused on the development of intelligence tests. So, intelligence tests are just used for assessing an individual's mental aptitudes. It's a natural way or ability of somebody being able to take care of something and comparing them with the aptitudes of others, and then using numerical scores to compare them. Now, when intelligence is most accurate indicator of success, there is a zero point 0.6 correlation with economic and career success. It is important to note that intelligence is not a lone indicator of success. Another semi-predictor of success is one's grit or conscientiousness. A high conscientiousness grit has a zero point 0.3 correlation with economic and career success. While there is no correlation between brain size and intelligence or biological sex when it comes to intelligence averages, there is some correlation with the size and activity of the frontal and parietal lobes when measured of gray neural cell bodies and dendrites and white axons of brain matter. This essentially means, guys, that people with high amounts of gray and white matter have more neurons and neural activity at their disposal for intelligence, thus producing more memories. Now, there are two basic types of intelligence that we've already talked about, crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence. Crystallized intelligence is the ability to use previously learned skills, knowledge, and experience. It grows as we age, but does not exactly equate to memory. Now, fluid intelligence, on the other hand, is one's natural ability to learn quickly, adapt, and problem solve in novel situations or situations that you have never been in. This essentially is a measure of one's IQ, how quickly one can solve problems, understanding concepts, skills, and learn. So, unlike crystallized intelligence, fluid intelligence decays as we age beyond our late teens and early 20s. Now, general factor of intelligence theory. One of the first sets of the field work that attempted to identify intelligence was Charles Spearman. The concept of general intelligence, according to Spearman, was an overall intelligence factor that underlied specific mental abilities and is therefore measured by every task on a test. So Spearman used factor analysis, which is a statistical procedure that identifies clusters of related items called factors, to develop a test with the purpose of identifying different dimensions of performance that underlie a person's total score. So now Spearman identified multiple measurable factors and found what he believed to be one major factor that he fueled by a pool of mental energy. Now Spearman named this pool general factor of intelligence. So he really believed that we just had one general aptitude, one general intelligence. Spearman noted that individuals who performed well on one factor of intelligence tended to perform well on 7 categories. So additionally, those who performed poorly in one also tended to perform poorly on all other categories. So Spearman used the findings as evidence to support his theory of general factor intelligence. No, so, a later critic of Spearman's work was Howard Gardner. He asserted that intelligence is not passed on as general competency or incompetency, but rather intelligence seems to actually come as multiple abilities that come in different packages. For example, Gardner noted that damage to certain areas of the brain could harm or destroy one's abilities in one or two of the other factors of intelligence, but the others would remain intact. Additionally, Gardner noted that exception of savants. People, if you guys don't remember who savants are just people that have an exceptionally high ability in one intelligence factor but very low scores on another. So Gardner asserted that intellectual disabilities or abilities were just like athletic abilities. Running fast does not mean one can catch, throw, or jump well, but some athletes are competent in all categories. Now, another intelligence researcher is Robert Sternberg. He challenged these ideas, and he instead argued that there are three basic types of intelligence that we can think about. So these three were analytical, creative, and practical. Analytical intelligence, Sternberg argued, was well-defined problems with a single right answer. Creative intelligence was the ability to react adaptively to novel situations and generating novel ideas. Now, Sternberg attempted to measure creativity with novel tests such as presenting a picture and asking participants to provide a caption or label. Lastly, Sternberg argued that there was practical intelligence, which was required for everyday tasks. Practical intelligence was ill-defined and offered multiple solutions with examples, such as managing people, relationships, and business. Now, analytical, creative, and practical are all relatable to Robert Sternberg. Do not forget that. So those categories are part of his theory, and Howard Gardner has his theory of multiple intelligences. All right, so moving on. Emotional intelligence. Another primary contributor for intelligence was Daniel Goldman. He actually introduced what we now know as emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence was, to Goldman, essentially one's social intelligence, which is the ability to perceive, understand, manage, and use the emotions of ourselves, others, and that of groups. It had four basic components: perceiving, understanding, managing, and using emotion. Now, one must have the ability to perceive emotions by recognizing emotional states and faces, body language, and sound in others. Second, one must understand these perceptions in order to predict their own behavior or the behavior of others. Third, one must manage their own emotions or the emotions of others in various situations. And finally, one must use their own emotions or the emotions of others to enable adaptive or creative thinking and or provide for the social benefit of themselves or others. Now, emotionally intelligent people are often socially and self-aware and more successful in life, business, school, relationships, and even in parenting. While there is little in the way of a solid academic empirical evidence of this theory, the ability to understand and use emotions, attitudes, and social norms comes more naturally to some. Awesome. So let's continue here. So regardless, guys, of the intelligence theory that we might think about, one must have a valid test to which to assess intelligence. Now, intelligence tests are designed to measure one's intellectual ability by assigning a numerical value and then comparing it to others. The first intelligence test was created by Francis Galton. Galton, inspired by Charles Darwin's evolutionary theory, embarked on a request to find the most intelligent, athletic, and competent humans. Now, his purpose was motivated by more than just curiosity. As Galton was a founding member of the eugenics movement, a movement bent on improving the human gene pool, Galton was looking for superhumans in people. And Galton attempted to find superhumans by actually putting them through these tests. While he had hoped to find ideal humans and encouraged them to reproduce, no such humans were found. As a result, the results were very inconsistent. Now, while we care very little about his failure to find superhumans, we do care that he formed the concept of using a numerical test to measure intellectual ability. Now comes Alfred Binet, right? Alfred Binet actually takes another step in order to have everything work efficiently the way that we have now in the school systems when it comes to intelligence testing. So in France, at the time, Alfred Binet began his education program, and he encountered difficulty throwing together many children, right? So let me just tell you the background. The French government wanted to get a test, right, that was valid in order to give students a numerical score so that way they can be placed to a certain grade level. So now this was the guy that actually took care of that for them. Binet theorized that each student developed in a linear fashion, with individuals progressing in comprehension at different speeds. Now, using the fundamental idea of intelligence testing set by Francis Galton, Binet created a test that assessed the student's mental age, which was essentially the average performance of people at a certain age. So, for example, at the chronological age of 7, most students can add numbers proficiently. If one is at 10 years of age, but you cannot add numbers all that well, then we could say that you do not have the mental state of being seven. So this also led to the revolution of the school system and then having the first grade, the second grade, so on and so forth. Now, Binet did develop this test in sole purpose of identifying students' mental development to close the gap and catch their mental age up their chronological age, not to demean or label students. In fact, Binet expressed fear of labeling, so he was actually very afraid of people using this for the wrong purpose or using tests to label individuals. Now, Louis Thurstone, right? Louis Thurstone transformed the field of intelligence because he openly criticized Spearman's factor analysis. He devised a far more effective and accurate psychometric technique. In fact, the fundamentals set by Thurstone are still used today during the process of factor analysis. With his new psychometric approach, he used factor analysis to reduce intelligence to 7 primary factors: word fluency, verbal comprehension, spatial ability, perceptual speed, numerical ability, inductive reasoning, and memory. Now, in doing so, Thurstone provided a much more accurate set of intelligence factors and noted that while Spearman's theory was generally true and that most people scored similarly in all categories, there was a minority of exceptions. The techniques devised by Thurstone actually would later be used by researchers such as Howard Gardner to offer alternatives or at least nuanced revisions to Spearman's theory of general factor of intelligence. So expanding on Binet's ideas, Louis Terman, this other guy right here, who worked at Stanford University, he actually um, combined the concepts of mental age and utilized the test making and factor analysis practices pioneered by Spearman. Terman devised the Stanford Binet intelligence quotient. Now, this test was a lot better, and just by simply adding this, it revolutionized the way that information was gathered in reference to intelligence. So now this was a test that analyzed one's mental age and divided it by the chronological age and then multiplied it by 100. For example, an 8-year-old with the mental age of 10 with a score of 125 would have a 125 mental age. So as such, a person of average intelligence would have a score of 100 as their mental and chronological ages were identical. So when we talk about Terman, his formula, let me just check here on the time. Awesome. So we still have a little bit of time. So Terman's, we did talk about the formula revolutionizing the industry, right? It just made everything a lot better. So there was the development of this one idea called the Flynn effect. This asserted that once states are stable, provide education, and are very affluent enough to afford ample nutrition to children, teens, and adults for proper brain development, once genetic potential for intelligence may be realized. While the Flynn effect has begun to level off in the Western and East nations, the phenomenon is still consistent in developing nations. So once nations undergo development, right, they actually go from being a third world country to being a first world country, it does become a lot better, and things and generations of people become smarter within their community and within their atmospheres and experiences as well. So like Galton, however, Terman also had eugenics ambitions, noting the higher scores of Westerns and Northern Europeans. So eugenics, once again, it was just a way to, it was an idea to get rid of people that were not quote unquote intelligent and to only have intelligent people reproduce so that we can have an intelligent world. But that idea was shut down because it was highly relatable to the whole movement with Hitler and the Nazi movement. So keep that in mind. Now, let me get this back on the big screen. Now, another major critic of Spearman's general factor intelligence was David Wechsler. Wechsler asserted that Spearman's G factor was way too narrow, and further more that intelligence was more than just an effect than a cause. He believed that one's personality and willingness to engage in people, situations, and information impacted their intelligence. In 1955, he actually developed the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale. So this